If you want news and rumors that appeal, welcome to the Dusty Wheel.
Hey, welcome back to the Dusty Wheel.
If you want news and rumors that appeal, welcome to the Dusty Wheel.
Hey, welcome back to the Dusty Wheel.
Hey, welcome back to the Dusty Wheel. I'm your host, the Innkeeper, and this is our live call and talk show all about the Wheel of Time. Tonight is a deep dive into Aes Sedai. But before we get there, I want to cover a little bit of news, well, maybe a lot of news actually going on here at the Dusty Wheel. First of all, this one's a lot of fun for my friend Brian and I on Barside Chats. We're going to be interviewing author Margaret Weis this Saturday, one of the original creators of Dragonlance and a huge influence in our fantasy fiction lives as readers and writers. We can't wait. Expect that Barside Chats episode to come out next week. And then this Sunday, some of our good friends are back. We're doing our third episode of our first time Wheel of Time readers. Predictions and reactions to The Dragon Reborn. We can't wait to have the Wheel Weaves podcast with us. Danny and Brett are going to come back on and we're going to talk all about The Dragon Reborn. If you know any first-time readers out there, make sure they know they can show up for this one. There will not be any spoilers past The Dragon Reborn. Then, make sure you're back here WoT Wednesday because we're doing another cast member spotlight. We're talking all about Marcus Rutherford. I can't wait to have my guest Lesby Nerdy and Corey Lansdale back here at the Dusty Wheel talking all about Marcus Rutherford's works and talking about Perrin and if we believe these two will meet up and that Marcus will be able to embody Perrin. These are a lot of fun. We've had a blast doing episodes about Egwene, Rand, and Nynaeve. I can't wait for this one about Perrin. And there's something a little special with this one. Corey designed an image, drew an image specifically for this episode. If you haven't seen him yet, it's because you're not following him on Third Age Art. Make sure you go follow him. You can look at the description for this video and you can find out the details of how to enter to win this print. I can't wait. Like I said, I think you have until Monday to enter. Just the easiest way to do it is just go to Instagram, Third Age Art, and then make sure you follow the instructions on this image here. We'll actually pick a winner that night, next WoT Wednesday. So make sure you do that. And then I wanted to make a note, a friend of mine, friend of the channel, and a friend to many of you, Daniel Green has his own book coming out here soon. When? He said hopefully he'll be able to tell us more in the coming weeks, so make sure to follow him on social media. It's called Breach of Peace. And I just wanted to make sure everyone knew it was coming out. I can't wait to pick one up. Hopefully if you love Daniel and love what he does, you will also be picking one of these up. Can't wait to do a review here on the channel about this book. I got to do that. I got to have Daniel on and talk all about his book at some point. And then, last but not least, from a news standpoint, I told you we're going to do something kind of special. So next week is the start of a new chapter here at the Dusty Wheel, but on Twitch. We're starting the first ever Wheel of Time inspired Amazon Twitch watch party live streams, where we'll be watching the works of the cast and crew together, and eventually the Wheel of Time TV show with new guests, new content, and yes, you heard it, a new studio exclusively on Twitch. And for our first 500 followers over there, we'll be raffling off some mugs, coasters, and some watch party swag. You see what I did that? Watch party. So find us over at the Dusty Wheel. Go follow us on Twitch and keep a lookout for more news. We'll be talking more about this as it comes. And as we will be saying over there on Twitch at the Dusty Wheel, come watch and find out. Yes, hopefully you don't get too sick of hearing come watch and find out. So that being said, we're looking forward to that. No, don't worry, we're still doing the show here on YouTube, but we will also be doing this regularly over on Twitch. Can't wait to try that out with you. And last but not least, of course, for those of you that were watching the news this morning and joined us for our live coverage, you know that WoTSpoilers Prime dropped some fun news here, and instead of covering it right now by myself, I thought this is a wonderful time to bring my three guests to the show. So welcome to the Dusty Wheel, Shannan the Amyrlin of Tarvalon.net, Aradiapedia, the first chair of the Black Ajah for the WoTSpoilers podcast, and my good friend Christopher Cottingham of the Tor.com rereaders and of JordanCon. He's my JordanCon pal. So it's awesome to see you all. How you doing? Cheers.
Good. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here we go. So I think we need to start, before we jump into the Aes Sedai and I get all of your expert opinions about, the Aes Sedai themselves, why don't we actually throw up for the viewers the clip that was released, and then I'd like to get all of your opinions all about the clip here. So this is what WoTSpoilers Prime released to the public this morning, or I guess 1 p.m. Eastern today. And just note, there's been a little bit of color correction, a little audio amplification for this. So this isn't the original. If you want to see the original, make sure you go follow them and check them out on social media. So go ahead, Taylor, and show us this teaser trailer.
All right, let's make a deal.
So a lot has been made of this. We had a whole discussion. If you're watching this right now, we did a live stream covering this live, and had some interesting comments made about what people thought about this. Now, let me go to you, Shannan, at the top here. What were your thoughts when you saw this teaser trailer from WoTSpoilers Prime?
More than anything, I'm encouraged just by the amount of engagement from the fans for these little clips that we keep getting. I think, learning about Tom's guitar and now the ruby-hilted dagger, it's, or the ruby now encrusted dagger, I guess, which was the one of the changes that it's fun to see these little bits and to recognize that the show recognizes that they have fans already and that we love staying engaged with that content. And it's a great way to let us really kind of relish these little details that will probably get lost if it was just part of the regular show, right? But this way we can spend, the next week or so talking about the placement of a ruby. Right.
That was something I saw a lot after we did the live coverage this morning was, well, that is exactly where the ruby was in the, or the official dagger that Robert Jordan had, signed off on. But a lot of people mentioned, I think it was Jason with Dragon Mount. I thought he made that post mentioned, but from a film perspective, it makes a lot of sense that, you can highlight a ruby just like you saw happen in this. It's a little bit more difficult if you'd seen that hand pick that up and it's kind of covered by the hand that was picking it up or something. So it makes sense. But yeah, that was an interesting thing that came out. Aradiapedia, was there anything that you noted from this that just kind of stuck out to you as, or just general excitement about what you saw?
I was really excited to see something that actually felt like a clip rather than, a CGI set on which to put a prop sketch. This actually felt like a clip. But one of the things that I noticed was that it had the same sort of atmospheric energy as that one picture that we got of Matt
Yeah.
and Rand that everyone, color enhanced so that we could see, Barney looking like that. And it had that same gloomy atmosphere to it. So there a sense of continuity, I guess, that made me really excited that we are seeing little bits of a larger whole.
Yeah, I think that people are saying that's the first snippet that it feels like we actually got from what either as a trailer or from the show itself, where you really saw something happening. And we did get the Perrin and Egwene voices in that one that they released, but not along with the film, kind of a portion of the show itself. So, and yeah, that someone noted this morning that the concept art also of Shadar Logoth, this moment, and then the moment you just brought up, which was that leaked photo of Matrim and Rand, that all kind of works together. It feels the same kind of tone, mood. So yeah, I loved it. I love it. Chris, thoughts on what you saw from the trailer this morning?
Well, I will say first of all that this is, not particularly profound. I did find time to watch the trailer and see why my notifications were going crazy, but that's about all. It's been a really busy work day, and so I haven't seen a lot of the fan reaction, and so I'll note a couple of things. One, it is not the dagger that I saw in my head. The ruby is placed in my head. It's lower down and it's a little bigger, and the dagger is shinier, and But so that's the first thing. And the second thing is that really didn't matter at all, because what we saw was, like Aradiapedia said, it was like looking at a clip, and the creepiness, the darkness of the scene was perfect for Shadar Logoth. And I am really intrigued by that line, let's make a deal. Is that a deal to, help me carry this treasure out of the city like we saw in the books, right? Or is there something more to that conversation? So I'm really looking forward to seeing where that goes. But just that overall sense of atmosphere, I thought was perfect for where that's supposed to be.
Yeah, one thing, and I don't know why it didn't occur to me while I watched this morning, and maybe it was just the excitement of the moment itself, was that doesn't have to be when that is said, right? The moment of him opening it can be completely separated from what we're actually hearing there.
Sure.
And in the moment we were talking about it, I was like, oh, I wonder who was saying that or when. So that in and of itself seemed to, now that I can kind of disconnect those two events potentially, I'm looking forward to seeing what they decided to do with this. There's a lot that they could, right? Matt doesn't seem, maybe Rand and Perrin are right there. It's like, you don't really know what's going on in that scene. Maybe they are deep down inside, down some stairs to a dungeon treasure room, if you will. Or maybe they've split them up, and maybe only Matt is aware of this entity. You just don't know what they've picked, and that's, I don't know. For me, that's the excitement of seeing this. It feels like it's going to be a whole different story, even though it's not a different story, right? It's a little bit of a different turning, and so I won't go into watching each episode like, oh, I know what happens. So I'm looking forward to that aspect. I know a lot of fans are like, I hate that. I want to know what happens because I want to know that no one ever changed this at all. Shannon, are you okay with this idea that however this, the ruby's positioned differently, but are you also there with Chris, which is like all that didn't matter, like the tone and the mood and getting the people right and getting the event right versus kind of following a specific detailed list of how it has to be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, what we've seen in how they're taking care of this story and of the characters that we love and everything that we love is that they are taking great care to show us important aspects of the story and keeping true to the tone. And we know that the crew members and the cast working on the show care about it. And I think that that's what's most important. And no matter what, even if it was honestly verbatim from the books, it would be a new experience, right?
Sure.
And I think we all hopefully are going to look forward to that new experience. It is a little scary because we have this story in our head so concretely in a lot of ways, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting for us all to experience it together and evidently now have watch parties.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the watch parties. Those are going to be fun. I know that maybe I explained that too quick, but yeah, it's going to be fun until we premiere that show. We'll be watching some of the previous works, and I think there'll be a lot of. We've been doing this with the Becoming episodes that we do here, which is just talk about the things people have done, and we leave links for people to go watch them. It'll be fun to actually go watch some of these. For example, Obey is also on Amazon Prime right now. It has Marcus Rutherford in it. And that is, and very well may be our first watch party, which will be a lot of fun before our episode happens next week, talking about Perrin. So, Aradiapedia, when it comes to just everything you've seen at this point from WoT on Prime, before we jump into discussion of Aes Sedai, do you still have some concerns as a huge fan of the books of what this TV show is going to become?
Not really. It's not going to be what I expect. And there's going to be a bunch of naysayers like that. Those two things are true regardless of what happens. And I just want to manifest that it's going to be the best thing and be excited, because then, it's not going to be what I think it should have been, but nobody gave me the budget. So.
No one specifically asked any of us. That's very true. And yeah, I think I feel the same way, which in the end is I'm enjoying the ride. I got to enjoy the ride, right? Like I picked these books up in 1990. That was a fantastic 3 decades. And I met so many wonderful people along the way and keep on meeting them. But yeah, the ride now that we're going to be taking off the TV show, I'm just there to enjoy it. Like at this point, it's just popcorn. I'm like, yes, we get more Wheel of Time. Hopefully another decade. That's what I'm looking forward to. Okay, so for those of you that are watching us, we're here to talk about Aes Sedai. Go and obviously, if you want to continue talking about the teaser trailer, or you want to go hear the conversation this morning, you can go watch that later. I think we had like an hour 15-minute long discussion of that. Had callers call in. It was fantastic. So, but before we do begin, please like this video so other fans can find this live conversation about Aes Sedai. And if you are new to this place, come subscribe. It's a lot of fun here. And also go follow tarvalon.net and WoTSpoilers. I mean, hopefully all of you know WoTSpoilers at this point. But yes, make sure you check them out if you have not somehow heard of both of these places. Wonderful sources of just extremely hardcore fan freak, Wheel of Time content. So that's what I love. That's what I love about all three of you. you're my kind of geeks when it comes to the Wheel of Time. So, okay.
That's the one that does the Robert Jordan Scholarship, right? I'm remembering that. I won that one year. It was the
really?
Scholarship the only official scholarship through the FAFSA process that I ever applied to and got was that one.
Awesome.
Only one ever.
Yeah.
So
we're working right now. That's wonderful. We're working right now to get ready to release the information for our scholarships coming up for this year.
Awesome.
We have a lot of reference information that Matt is referencing as far as details from the books and details from our site. But we also have charity outreach, community online, and then community offline in a normal year. So that scholarship is part of our charitable and philanthropic efforts that we're really proud of.
Super cool.
That is super cool. Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic. So yes, tarvalon.net is just a fantastic resource from just a data asset perspective, beyond just the wonderful people that run it. So yeah, thank you for that. Now, Aes Sedai. I know all of you love this topic, and so I'm looking forward to hearing it from you about the Aes Sedai. Where, from a conceptual standpoint or from a canon standpoint, where do the Aes Sedai come from or come into the story? When's the first mention of them?
Well, I mean, which part of the story?
So yeah, if we were starting, that's a good question. Starting at the first age, when do we first run into Aes Sedai? Or come to a knowledge about them?
I mean, it's on page 1. Page 2.
That's true. That's a good point. The prologue, I've never thought about that. The prologue is our first engagement with Aes Sedai. That's a fantastic point that I've never thought about.
Apocalypse powers. I mean, you're like, oh, these are probably bad people, right? And then you have to get led into realizing that it's complicated.
Yeah. That's like throwing my brain lots of places, which I didn't even intend. So yeah, that's fantastic. The book themselves really bring us right to them in the prologue. And not only that, like you said, really show the destructive capability of these individuals clearly, right? Like, almost show just how casual life is, or can be snuffed out by these individuals and had been. And all is that this is Aes Sedai. And that's an interesting setup that Jordan's done for us there that I hadn't ever considered before. Because they obviously come from, the second age themselves. And what's interesting is the name means servants of all. So you start off the prologue with this moment, and then you get servants of all. So, and maybe let's go to that. Why did they call them, at least from your standpoint, Chris, like why were the Aes Sedai called the servants of all?
I guess, I don't know if I thought about that, but the Age of Legends, the technology was entirely based around the one power, and so you have this group of people who have these phenomenal powers that are not available to most of society, but they are creating and maintaining the devices and the technology that provides the standard of living for everybody. They're also providing transportation, communications, healing. They are, I guess, not solely responsible for food crops, but they create things like the Nim, who help, the Green Man, and who help, therefore, with food production. And so they're really kind of integrated into all of those aspects of life and using their powers to improve life for everyone. So it's a very apt name. It's also, I'm sure, an important philosophy to try and instill in people who have that much power, that their power is meant to be used for others rather than for their own benefit, because they certainly have the potential for a lot of abuse of that power.
Yeah, that's man. You're throwing me stuff that like thoughts I didn't have about this, which was servants from all from a perspective of just global dependency, and dependency might be the wrong word, but just a society that is now built around the one power. And Jordan talks about this, right? The reason why it was so devastating, what happens at the end of the Age of Legends, is their society is built around the one power. It's not like we think about today, like, well, at least you'll have candles if you don't have electricity. But how do all of us feel when the electricity goes out? It's like our world is over. It's like the world has ended. And what if you can't get gas and you don't have electricity? It's all of a sudden, how do I get my food? And how do I, and so yeah, servants of all, because society runs off of the one power, and without them, people in that society couldn't survive, or so yeah, that's an interesting take on it. Shannan, any thoughts on servants of all beyond kind of what Chris has mentioned there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes, I don't know, Matt, if you want to show.
Yeah, which quote is it?
The fifth one.
The fifth quote. Taylor, can you throw up Shannan's fifth quote for us? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so, and this was from the World of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time book. And, similarly, honestly, to the canon of the books, this one also starts off talking about Aes Sedai and Age of Legends. And that quote said, according to all sources, the Aes Sedai and the Age of Legends had a very loose sort of organization. They had their own internal governing structure through the Hall of the Servants, which was the core of the guild that controlled and regulated all those who could channel. And I thought that this was a really interesting statement. Specifically, the word guild is the one that I really kind of focused in on, and thinking of the Aes Sedai as a guild, just like they had merchants guilds or other vocations, and just kind of recognizing this commodity that needed regulation and organization, but also understanding that it was a very loose organization, and maybe partially it was loose because there wasn't the same struggle as maybe after the breaking, right, where there was tension and a little bit more of a complicated relationship. But in the Age of Legends, where there was a little bit more freedom and I would say there was a little bit more resources available to all, that the Aes Sedai were able to serve in their roles and serve the community around the world, and not necessarily have a very strict governing organization that maybe developed later into the White Tower.
Yeah, so weird. When you think about what Chris just said, which is, and what we just talked about, almost an entire civilization that has now based itself around, the existence of and the use of the one power. And then that quote you just brought up, which is like, there's a loose guild. Like, I don't know, in my head, I'm thinking, why isn't there just this huge global organization that that somehow manages all of this? So yeah, but it wasn't that way, and maybe that's part of the just how much they loved the Age of Legends. It's so legendary because, right, it's this loose guild and servants of all, and a world that runs off this one power and doesn't kind of require what we might think is like certain government necessities in order to kind of run such an organization. I don't know. It's
Aradiapedia. So I have thoughts.
Yeah. Let's express them. Let's get it.
So I have thoughts, and then also I will tie into Master of the Deck.
Okay.
Hot take. The Age of Legends was a dystopia. So not to spoil anything, but in Broken Earth, the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, which I also podcast, this gets explored, and the answer is not pretty. Where is all this power coming from? Where is all this extra energy coming from? Are there, this is my idea, are there like Aes Sedai that are at the bottom of the pecking order, so they do way more of the heavy lifting than the ones who are up in the ivory tower getting to do research into why non-binary power is actually evil? It's just, there are questions that are addressed in Broken Earth that make me look at the Age of Legends like, how could it not have been a dystopia?
Sure. Yeah, so, and that, I feel like, brings up the obvious point of, we know that some of the Forsaken, for example, like, it wasn't rosy, if you will. I mean, Jordan talks about that. There wasn't war in the sense of how we might think of war and how war turned up in the end of the Age of Legends. But that doesn't mean that there weren't people doing bad things. And people, like you said, there wasn't hierarchies, and people at the bottom of the pecking order probably, like you said, probably doing more of the grunt work, if you will, and those at the top maybe not so much. And I love the comment of that some actually get to research, non-binary
Masana
powers.
is who I would be if I was a Forsaken. Masana is definitely my Forsaken. So I feel the energy of the thwarted researcher.
I love it. I love it. That's a good question for chat. Who is your Forsaken? Who would you be if you were a Forsaken? I want to see that from chat. If you happen to be watching us over on Twitter and on Facebook, hopefully you enjoyed this little sneak peek into what we do here at the Dusty Wheel. But if you want to watch the rest of this episode, please join us over on YouTube. It's just really simple. Look up the Dusty Wheel on YouTube. You can find us over there and watch the rest of us. Hopefully, like I said, you've enjoyed this little moment all about the Aes Sedai. Now, dystopian. Chris, do you like this idea? Is the Age of Legends, was it this kind of dystopian world that seems nice on the outside, but really has a seedy underbelly?
I suspect, like everything else, it's pretty mixed. It is legend, and one of the themes of the series is that over time, over distance, information gets distorted, and so there are certainly dark sides to it that get forgotten as people remember how great things once were. We do have some firsthand accounts from Rand's experience in the Wayback Machine, where it looks like it was pretty good for most people, but also that there were some darker sides. And like you said, we also have firsthand accounts from what we know about the Forsaken and what they did that tell us there were definitely ways that people were being abused. Simrog was a great healer who exacted pain from her subjects. And we know once Rand recovers his memories as Lews Therin, we know that he talks about how he was arrogant, and that maybe Demon Dread had a point when he talked about how Lews Therin was not the nicest guy, and that the ways that he felt wronged by Luce and maybe he wasn't just making all of that up, you know. So there's definitely some potential for some seedy underbelly.
Yeah, Shannan, do you like this idea that servants of all was probably like asterisk, you know, like it was like servants of all, you know, in the sense of, is that the reality of what they really experienced? I mean, considering what the Forsaken tell us, as much as we can believe them, or considering what we get in the world of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, you know, and what we hear in the books, there certainly were terrible things going on. But it almost was like, but it's okay because it's the Age of Legends, and as long as we can persist our nirvana of the Age of Legends, then we don't have to address these things. Or do you think it was probably just like today, which is like they were trying to address stuff. It was hard to find people that were misusing the one power.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just it's a history written 3,000 years ago, and not even really written. You know, I think that this is even the world of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, the book, starts off by saying, this is the best information we've got. It's not, you know, like
right.
Huge asterisk on the whole book. So I think that it might be servant with an asterisk, but it's really everything with an asterisk, right? Like this is the shred of information that we have from 3,000 years ago, and we're kind of building off from that. I think, you know, servant of all and Aes Sedai and the translation of that versus, you know, compared with the translation of what the Aiel were, which what the Aiel are now, and you know, a lot can happen in 3,000 years, and our current situation probably helps paint the picture of what we think it should have been back then.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that you said an asterisk for everything, and that's the way Jordan loved it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
he loved to do it that way, which is like, you can't ever know. You can't ever know. That's just right. It. You just have to know that there's myths and there's legends and there's facts, and all things kind of get twisted up and spit out over ages. And here's the best you can know. And I think that's what makes this kind of conversation fun, actually.
And even then, like, you know, seeing those same facts and truths from different points of view, you know, especially when, for example, when you're talking about the Forsaken, and you know how much I love Moghedien,
right?
You know, they all had very specific points of view on the risks that they were taking, and you know, the goals that they thought were worthy to, you know, to them personally, and that was a wide range between Forsaken and outside, you know, all of the Aes Sedai.
Yeah, and by the way, I have to ask this, Chris, because now we know Masana, Moghedien, and Lanfear. Who's your Forsaken of choice? We have to know that before we move forward.
I serve the light, as far as you know.
No, you can't. Don't give me that
option.
Yeah, none of that. We're gonna stop the show right here, Chris. You got to pick a Forsaken.
Swear on this oath, Rod.
Exactly, I love it.
My guess would be Asmodean for Chris.
No, I think Asmodean is kind of a tool, but and also a better musician than me, so I don't like him for that reason. Wow, who would mine be? I know yours would be Lanfear, Matt.
Yeah, we got Lanfear, Moghedien, Masana. Who do we got, Chris? You're on the spot here.
Mondred.
This is live forever.
I might go Demondred.
Okay.
I'll provisionally go that. I don't know that I have thought about that. I like them all.
Okay. I like Innkeeper's wife just wrote in chat, dang, I wish I knew what a Forsaken was. Someday. Thank you, Wadam Prime. That's the question you're going to answer for my wife. And I appreciate that so much. That's going to be fun. Watching the show, and actually they'll know some of the words they've been hearing around the house for the last decades. So that'll be fun. Aradiapedia, when it comes to the Age of Legends, what else is remarkable, or might not fans that have read the books, but maybe not as closely as some, remember or know about the Aes Sedai from the Age of Legends, whether or not it's up through the breaking, but that period of time, was there anything that you kind of came across where you thought, you know, this is interesting about them?
I think it's the ways that technology sped up their lives, the fact that they could travel instantly. Like, think about how much that would change what you would need to innovate, right? Like, I've had this discussion with people in the WoTSpoilers community before about, like, what could you use Quendiar for? You could use it to make more efficient engines that wouldn't have parts that would break. Why would you need to invent a more efficient combustion engine if you have gateways? So
Right.
kind of thinking about just the power they had, the knowledge they had, the tel'aran'rhiod they had, and what that would have changed about daily life. Even for the people who are on the bottom of the pecking order and don't have the power, how different would society be? You know, waste was immediately gotten rid of, and the air was always clean, and all of these things that just, what can you do when you don't have to worry about dying from malnutrition before you're 30? What can you do when a broken leg isn't going to cripple your Olympic career? Like, there's just so much that we can't even imagine the ripple effects of in the Age of Legends.
Yeah. Do you think, because obviously it sounds like from what we know that the first channeler came about either at the end of the first age, or Jordan talked about, or you could call it the beginning of the second age. It's right around that time. And it would seem like Jordan's kind of going along this idea that our time frame is kind of a, you know, a map, if you will, for our first age. We don't know when that ends, though, what that end of our first age would be. But Aes Sedai live a long time. Now, do you think that was a benefit to the community? Is that why the Age of Legends ends up coming about? Because you have these people living for hundreds of years who have all of this knowledge and capability and kind of can share it, and their lives are being extended? Or was that to the detriment of that society?
It'd be very hidebound.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, because I'm looking at this saying, those are the people that in the end destroyed the world, right? That's those same individuals brought about the end of that civilization. And so
it can be very frustrating to be an up and coming generation when these people are centuries yet from relinquishing power. But that might not be a great setup. Any other thoughts? Go
ahead, Chris.
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the exact reference or number, but I do know that general lifespan was pretty extended, and that a non-channeler could live up to, I want to say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 200. If anybody remembers that exact,
I feel like
reference.
that sounds right.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. So lifespan was generally expanded, but I was thinking about Aradiapedia's point about innovation. And if all technology is based around use of the one power and the tel'aran'rhiod, if you're not a channeler, what is there for you to innovate in? You know, what is there for you to do to achieve? And if I can read a quick quote, as we were talking about it, I was looking back at the basic description of the Age of Legends, and you know, it does say war had been eliminated, even the word for war had been forgotten, that crime was almost non-existent, that they had wiped out poverty, and you know, everybody was hungry. And so then it says this, and this is page 30 of the big white book. It says, the people of this age had long outgrown any interest in material wealth as a goal unto itself. Status and honor were all important and could only be gained through service to the community. All hoped to be allowed to serve according to their gifts and to be found worthy of that service. And it reminds me that in the Age of Legends, if you were especially honored, you got that third name, that honorific. And I think that's important too when we're talking about why were they known as servants of all. It's important to remember that a big driver, a big motivation was to be honored for the service that you provided. So there's a sort of a selfish aspect to that.
What's interesting, this is the first time I've ever thought about the phrase you just read about that even the word war was forgotten. First time I realized, oh yeah, channelers, they just compelled people to forget the word. I totally forgot. Like, it never hit me before. I was like, how do you get people to give up a concept that everyone knows? You use the one power and you prevent them from or remembering what that. Anyways, I was looking at the darker side of what that phrase, how you might turn that phrase, which is, you know, and Master of the Deck put this out there, which was, you know, unreliable narrator, you know, concept of it sounds nice in practice, but how does that come about, and why do those things, and I don't know. I just played with that idea of they erased the concept of war with the one power, which is probably a good use of the power, if you will. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
It feels a little, like Star Trek. Like the hope is that if we wipe out all the material needs, that then people will stop fighting, and then we won't have war anymore. And yet, lots of Star Trek, lots of other fiction has explored the fact that maybe it's not quite that simple. The Aes Sedai of the Age of Legends were the ones who developed binders, what becomes the oath rod, binders to force people to follow a certain set of rules. And the fact that there was a need for binders says there were people doing things they shouldn't have been.
It also means the fact that somebody could build one means a lot of people probably did. And it means they probably had people bound for other reasons other than just what we might think of as controlling crime or something to that effect. Shannan, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, last thing, and it actually relates to what Shannan said about the Aes Sedai of the Guild, which I really have not thought about, and am fascinated thinking about that, because lots of guilds had very draconian rules, and I do wonder what due process was like for an Aes Sedai, and how much of an appeal they had before someone used a binder on them.
Yeah, we don't get to know that, which is fun, because then you can just apply kind of our understanding of humanity as human beings, and think, oh, it was probably like the full gamut of possibilities probably happened there. Shannan, anything else to kind of add of things that people might not think about, or questions that might come up when you start thinking about the Aes Sedai and the Age of Legends before we kind of tackle the breaking and getting into the Third Age?
I mean, I think one of the topics I think that we had talked about a little bit, if you want to pull up the one other quote I had about Age of Legends.
Yeah, was that number 4? Yeah, Taylor,
Yep.
Can you give us Shannan quote number 4? Go for it.
Okay, so this one also, big white book. Oddly, it appeared from the fragmented records concerning Aes Sedai that many of them followed vocations which had little or nothing to do with the one power or being Aes Sedai, right? So this is just building on that idea and clarifying the massive kind of, I don't want to use the word infiltration, but distribution of Aes Sedai through daily life, and recognizing that using that one power was not necessarily how they were earning their third name and necessarily serving the community. And we see that the specific examples we happen to have are the Forsaken, because they come through to the current age. But it's an interesting concept to think about the Aes Sedai, working at a bank or in a hospital, or manufacturing different tools for daily life. So it's a different perspective on Aes Sedai than we have in the age that we see.
Yeah, like writers, researchers. Yeah, the action. I do want to touch on that one. I do want to remind everybody, we put up a spoiler banner. Hopefully those are watching, I won't get comments afterwards like, you didn't tell me there'd be spoilers. I don't know how you would get this far if you thought that, but there is a spoiler banner up. Know that we're going to be talking about the books, especially in the Third Age. Some things are coming up, and even ages beyond that. And I want to remind everybody that it is a live call-in talk show. We'll try to weave your calls into our conversation about Aes Sedai. If you want to give us a call, 1-313-825-5968. That's 1-313-TALK-WOT. Feel free to call us, and we'll pull you in as we discuss some of these topics. But I don't want to jump too out of that. I want to stay in that spot you just brought us, Shannan, which is why? Why wouldn't it, if you can pick any vocation, you'd think you'd be like, okay, if I can earn my third name, I can gain notoriety or whatever it is, respect by serving people. I'm going to do that by coming up with some cool one power stuff. And I'm going to become the best channeler in the world, and I'm going to focus on this because apparently I don't need to worry about money. I don't need to worry about food. I just need to worry about, doing cool stuff for people. So I'm just confused, why would Jordan write that, the Aes Sedai, that wasn't their vocation, was channeling? Do any of you kind of have an idea off the top of your heads, why that would make sense for that age?
For that, I'm not sure about that for that age. I think because when we were talking about this a little bit, before the show. If, for example, if somebody had the power of an Aes Sedai today in our world, right, they would be a superhero and that would be their job. And they would not also work at a bank or at a newspaper or have a sacred identity, right? But I don't know. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of a tool called the Gallup Strengths Finder, and understanding your intuitive strengths, be that really organizing things or planning for things or building collaborative relationships, et cetera. And so maybe this innate talent or ability didn't necessarily align or support your interests and where you had other strengths, right? If your strength was in building these collaborative relationships and maybe it's working in mediation, right? We never really see how the one power is used in mediation. We see the opportunity of the Grey Sisters to use the clout and the authority of the White Tower, but not necessarily the one power. And so, there's an interesting overlap there and how the one power is used versus how the individual sisters' strengths and interest areas and abilities are leveraged. And we see actually in New Spring, when Swan and Maureen are coming into the Blue Ajah, that they're really not given a choice if they're leveraging their talents, right? If somebody's good at figuring out puzzles, then that's what they're going to do. And, at least as they're probably lower on the pecking order and earning their way up. So they're, using the one power is one thing, and using the strength in the power is one thing, but also using, those other talents that each individual has, men and women, is also important.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind along with that is they were living in an age that didn't have a vendetta necessarily against channelers, right? Like channelers were looked upon as, generally positive for the community. So they weren't necessarily in fear of their beliefs. They weren't in fear of their abilities, to the point where they might want to consolidate down and have a structural kind of mechanism to, make sure their messaging was right and make sure they didn't run afoul of problems out there. Not that probably didn't happen. It probably did, but not to some degree that clearly that enabled them to not define themselves that way. And I can see that somewhat almost. I can almost see that from a, when you have, I don't want us to take a sidestep too far here, but just from a religious standpoint, when you are a majority religious culture or something like that, or just a majority belief, take it from an ideological standpoint, when you follow the kind of majority ideology, there's less maybe concern to consolidate or, a need to kind of break off and have a subculture. But when you have an ideology that's less, it's a minority ideology, there is a tendency, because you find that safety and that comfort in the people that understand you and believe a certain way. So I feel like that, at least for me, that helps me understand why things changed between the Second Age and Third Age. Aradiapedia, any thoughts here?
I agree. I'm not.
Excellent. That's a good thought. And Chris, anything to add? We'll bring our first caller in here. I want us to get into the Third Age here shortly, but yeah, any thoughts here, Chris, on this conversation before we bring our caller in, our first caller?
Well, you did spark me to think something about the Third Age. So you're talking about the Age of Legends being a time where they didn't have a fear of channelers, and channelers were integrated into society, and that is an interesting contrast, because other channeling organizations besides the Aes Sedai were much more integrated with their societies, the Windfinders and the Wise Ones, and they also were respected and not feared by their cultures. They were revered and looked up to, rather than being afraid and suspicious the way people were of Aes Sedai. And so that integration in society versus the Aes Sedai decision to hold themselves apart. And they talk about, projecting this image that they are a different flesh, and in a lot of ways that actually lessens their status and their effectiveness.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to kind of bring some of that into the Third Age and how that does work. You know, when you still might have an overarching concern of other cultures, but you still have that respect, you do find different tendencies of the people of that culture towards channelers than others. So yeah, I like how Jordan kind of mixed that together in the Third Age. Dana just asked, how are the Aes Sedai divided in the Age of Legends? Yeah, not into Ajahs. You know, for those of you that are watching, well, kind of, right? Like it was a lowercase Ajah, right?
Yes.
It was a lowercase a, if you will, because it was more kind of like your cause of the moment, you know.
Temporary affiliations.
Yeah, you could think about like,
out.
yeah, exactly. Like, and there was lots of them, you know, there weren't just 7. There were, and basically you could start up your own. It's like, I kind of think about it as like, take this the right way, but like high school clubs, you know, it's like, I want to do this thing and I'm going to find people and you can join my club and we're going to go do this thing. And then it would like 3 weeks later, it might be like, why aren't we meeting anymore? It's like, I don't know. I'm done with my club. Let's move on to this other club. In other words, like, yeah, these loose affiliations, these things you can start up, lots of Ajahs, lowercase a. And I think that change kind of speaks, or I think we were just speaking about that change, but not specifically. So that, yeah, Dana, thank you for asking that question. For those that are watching, yeah, Age of Legends had this, like Shannan's been saying, this loose affiliation. Vocationally, people weren't really tied to channeling. And so, yeah, they would end up, I don't know, I wouldn't call channeling a hobby for them, but, you know, it ended up being kind of a side thing, a part of their lives, but not like the main force for a lot of people. So let's bring, yeah, go ahead.
You made me think of Age of Legend Ajahs as being kind of like the ribbons at Jordan Con or another con. You just pick the ones you like.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yes, I think that's a great way to think about it. And why don't we bring our first caller now into the show and see what Art has to say. Hey, Art, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing?
Oh, hey, guys. How you doing?
Fantastic. So how's your evening going?
Oh, it's great. It was a great day. Lots of news, and had a great time earlier today with you guys revealing the dagger and everything.
Yeah, that was fun, right? So thoughts about Aes Sedai? What kind of kicked off your call?
Oh, absolutely my favorite, probably my favorite subject in the series. I was just going to make a commentary. Like you have to remember, like Robert Jordan was kind of giving us his take on Tolkien-esque fantasy, Lord of the Rings cycle. Aes Sedai have always reminded me of like the Istari, the wizards that were sent by the Ainur from afar to help the people of Earth to flourish and to survive, basically. So there's that, and it's really, if we talk about the Age of Legends, like I've always thought of like how foreign a concept it is for us, people who are, well, whatever age we're in right now, whatever, first age, second age, like the concept itself. And I can hear you guys just talking about it, that the concept of a perfect place or an Age of Legends itself, or a Utopia, it's so foreign to us that, like, of course, we always put our worldview into, what would be an Age of Legends. Like, well, people must have been like, evil underneath and everything.
Sure.
But I kind of see it as like, if it's that foreign for us to think about a perfect society, and these Aes Sedai are kind of like the pinnacle of this society, like, but it's right there in front of us. What was the excerpt you read? Like, war was like barely a concept to them, like an ancient throwback to something before they couldn't even, they had a hard time grasping the idea of like thousands of millions of people killing each other over what. So, but also you guys are talking about the Forsaken too, like, it's right there too. Like their interaction with Third Age people in the series can tell us a lot about, like, the distinct differences between, Aes Sedai of the Age of Legends and the more modern Aes Sedai, if you will, for the Third Age. So, I'm just starting from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. That's the fun part about this, which is all we can do is imagine what it must have been like, in the Second Age for those people. But like you're saying, it's probably impossible for any of us sitting here to imagine what it would be like to not know the concept of war, right? Like, what would that be like from just a thought process perspective? And that probably, just that one thing is probably the way the Forsaken look at the Aes Sedai, which is like, you can't even imagine the things that were possible, or the world we came from. Of course, then they're proved wrong, which is new things do happen. And Jordan loved to play with that idea of, sure, you can't see this thing, but there always are new things that are going to kind of come about. So yeah, that's any comments on Art's, anything come to mind to the panel about Art's comments?
I just think it's always really valuable to decenter your perspective, and you're right that like we have a very specific view. It's like kind of how some sci-fi, like, it ages fine except for the magnetic tape in the story. Like everything else aged fine, but there's magnetic tapes, and it's just like it's dated. So I think you're right that we can very easily fall into a trap of assuming that we have some sort of central view, and really trying to step outside of that is a good thought exercise when we imagine if a utopia is a utopia or not. Like, we don't necessarily know. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Art, I have a question for you that all of us have answered. Who is your Forsaken of choice?
Oh, I have to say Lanfear.
Sweet.
The most consequential.
Thank you.
Most consequential Forsaken. I mean, she was truly trying to earn that third name. She's trying to find an alternate power source that everybody could share, male and female, maybe even the non-channeler population. She was thinking that she was going to serve everybody. It's like, hey, instead of just centralizing it on these people, the Aes Sedai, maybe everybody can tap into this new power. And, she had the greatest of intentions, I think.
There you go. See, off-center thinking, which is what I think is important. That's how I've always felt about Lanfear, too. People just can't see it because they're too biased with their thought process. So. Hey, Art, have a good one, man. Thank you very much for calling in. Hey, we'll talk to you soon.
We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Matt, it makes me realize that I need to be more honest, because there was a Forsaken that came to mind that I didn't say.
Okay.
And I really think my favorite probably is Ashamiel. Partly the philosopher and theologian side of him appeals to me. And also, he is certainly the most consequential. This is what brought it to mind, because he is the most consequential and efficient and effective of the Forsaken, bar none. So,
I mean, bar none. That's debatable. So I don't want to turn this into a Forsaken fight, but later we will. Let me bring in this next caller before we get to our topic, because they're calling internationally, and I don't want to make them wait too much longer. So let's welcome into the show Emmy. Emmy, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing?
Hi, Matt. Hi, guys. How you going? Good.
It's been too long. It's been too long since we've heard from you. So how you doing?
I know. Yeah, I'm good. I've just been working, so the middle of the day when you guys are live is not a great time for me anymore. But I had today off, so I was lucky to catch you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Did you catch this morning's show also, or no?
Oh, I haven't watched it back live yet,
okay.
So I will. That's next on my list.
Fun. So, what were your thoughts about Aes Sedai that kind of kicked off the call?
Well, I was more sort of thinking about the TV show and how you think that they're going to approach introducing previous ages, and specifically, obviously, the Age of Legends. I mean, it's not really, well, for me, from my memory, it's not really until like the later books that we sort of start to learn a bit more about the Aes Sedai in previous ages. Like, we find out the real purpose of the oath rods and that sort of stuff later on in the books. So I was sort of thinking, I wonder, like, how do you think the TV show might approach introducing those previous ages, like maybe with flashbacks or yeah?
That's a great question. Shannon, you want to kick us off here on that answer? What have been your thoughts about how they should kind of integrate these concepts of the Second Age into the show?
Yeah. I mean, I think that to me, the natural link is the characters that survive into the Third Age, right? And so understanding, honestly, it's Lanfear. Lanfear is going to be the guy. They're going to flash back to Lanfear and Lutheran and maybe what some of the other Forsaken have done, depending on who's featured. But I think that understanding that these characters are unchanged from, thousands of years ago will help to make that connection and grow the world. Recognizing that there is going to need to be an intentional slimming down or, just kind of cutting of some of the content of our massive story. I do think that the Age of Legends and understanding that character context adds a lot of value, and I think that they'll keep it.
Yeah, and this is a good question for chat. While we're answering this, I'm kind of curious, what is the one moment that you think should be the first time we see the Second Age? If you had to choose, if you were Rafe and his team, in chat, I want to see the answers here. What's your first moment of the Second Age you would want to see on screen? And what do you think would be most impactful? So, but to you, Aradiapedia, what do you think about this question from Emmy? How do you think they should integrate the Second Age into this TV show?
I think a lot of, really leaning into Robert Jordan's myths fade to legend thing, because we can all recognize a mythic utopia from the past. This is like one of the oldest tropes in storytelling. So I think if they really lean into, this is the story everybody knows, but now we're going to twist it, I think that will allow people to have a lot of like, okay, I kind of know the assumptions that these people are working from, because they're the same assumptions I'm working from when I look at like a cosmology from this world that's like, there was a utopia and then we screwed up. So I think that just leaning into Robert Jordan's technique is going to help a lot with that. Obviously, flashbacks and character continuity as well definitely will be part of it.
Yeah, that was Brandon gave that advice to Rafe, which was just go to the books. Any question like this, go to the books. And Jordan's probably done it really well already, and kind of take some advice from him. I like that idea of focusing on the concept of it, myths and legends. How they do that, that's a really big question, which is, the wind, or, do you see like an intro to the show that shows like ages coming and passing, and then it arrives at an age? They have a lot of questions to answer about that, of how much they want to build that into their introduction of the show versus something we get later on. That's Chris, anything coming to mind here? How would you approach this? I know Shannan and Aradia just gave amazing answers. So, but anything you want to add to it?
Mostly that I trust the showrunners to have figured this out better than I will have.
That's weak sauce. I wouldn't have accepted that answer at 2:00 in the morning at JordanCon. Is all I'm saying. So
as you know, I would then keep going until 4:00 in the morning. So that's my preface, and it leads into saying I love the prologue to Eye of the World. It immediately drew me in, and there's part of me, despite the travesty that was Winter Dragon, that would really love to see it done right. But I can also imagine them not wanting to spend a lot of time doing that, wanting to establish our characters that we're going to be following and getting that human interest, which is why I think Shannon's right about Lanfear and Luther and flashbacks. I think certainly by the time, hopefully, we get to Rand and the Aiel and having that experience of viewing his past lives, that's obviously a great vehicle for some flashbacks. But I don't know. I suspect there would probably be some kind of voiceover and opening that kind of pitches that concept. And I'm thinking here of the Fellowship of the Ring movie, where they have some voiceover and a quick scene, and then you're into the present day. And maybe they won't be that predictable, but I think something like that could work.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll go that. If that feels like a way to do it, I'll be honest. I'm hoping for fewer voiceovers than other series, just from a personal preference standpoint. But I've seen a lot of people mention this, and which is Rhoydian is one that they bring up, Drilling the Boar, and then the prologue. Those seem to kind of be where people collect around Second Age moments that would be really interesting to include in the show. Emmy, I'll ask you that question, and then we'll let you go for the So, what is your answer to your own question?
Well, while you guys were talking, I just sort of had a thought pop into my head that maybe an obvious way to do it would be through Luz Theron in Rand's mind.
Sure.
And then I sort of thought about, if you remember in Game of Thrones, how when Bran's talking to the three-eyed raven, they're actually walking through the path, so you can see it all playing out, but they're sort of separate from it. So perhaps they could visit the first and second ages through Luz Theron being in Rand's mind, and they're sort of walking through it as it's happening. I don't know. Just, something like that. Maybe a flashback, but not being like a full flashback with a voiceover or that kind of thing.
Yeah, through Luz Theron, I think, is an obvious route, too, for sure. Emmy, thank you so much for calling. It's awesome to hear your voice. It's been too long. So, Emmy, for those of you that don't know, finished the series last year for the first time, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember when last year you did. When was it last year that you finished?
Oh, gosh. October, November, I think.
October,
November. It was a while ago
So,
now.
Yeah. A long time ago in fan years, I guess. So I'm so glad you were able to kind of enjoy these shows with us. So have a good one, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon, okay?
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Bye, guys.
Bye.
So we have some other callers. We're going to try to weave them in. I want to jump back to a conversation. Those of you that are waiting online, hopefully you can still hear the show while you're waiting. You know, if you need to step away or you have to end the call before we bring you in, I'm sorry. But like I said, we'll weave you into this conversation that we're having. But I did want to go back to and get us into the third age kind of officially here. We obviously have the breaking. We have the destruction of the utopian society. You know, we have channelers basically, you know, using the pawns that are the people, you know, and I shouldn't say using them, but obviously both fighting for the hearts and minds of the entire world and worlds, if you will, to defeat the Dark One. Or to win it for the Dark One. And then you have the sealing away of the Dark One and the tainting of the One Power. So when it comes to how that fundamentally changes the entire Aes Sedai society, anyone want to take a stab at, you know, what changes between these two ages when it comes to the Aes Sedai?
Well, there's the quote that I sent you.
Oh yeah, let's throw the one. Hey Taylor, can you throw the Aradiapedia's first quote up there?
Yeah, my only quote, but yeah,
only quote. There.
But
yeah, go for it.
So this quote between Egwene and Elaine, this conversation, we learned that it took them 300 years to admit defeat. This is, I mean, imagine that you have all these colleagues that you're really good friends with and you've worked together. This is a centuries-long tradition, and then suddenly half of them need to be removed from the category of human and put down. And what an incredible gestalt shift that would be. Yeah. And it took them 300 years of trying everything they could. And you know that Nynaeve would not have been nearly as notable in her strength at the time. She would have been closer into the bell curve. They were very angry, very dedicated, and they couldn't figure out a solution. And so that is an intense trauma that they as a society had to take hold of. And then obviously the Reds coming out of that with the ultimate expression of the opposite of that. To me, that is the biggest change in the Aes Sedai, is the fact that they lost half of who they were.
Yeah, this is. I want to ask you a variety of questions about this. I want to read this to people that might be listening and are not seeing this. It's from The Great Hunt, chapter 24. It says, do they always have to be gentled, she asked. Elaine stared at her mouth agape, and she quickly added, it is just that I'd think the Aes Sedai would find some other way to deal with them. And then you have, well, do not let any Red Sister hear you thinking it aloud, Egwene. They did try. For 300 years after the White Tower was built, they tried. They gave up because there was nothing to find. Come on, I want you to meet Min, not in the garden where Logain is going. Thank the light. So, to that point, and that's after the White Tower was built. For those watching, I don't have this fact in my head, but I'm sure the three of you do. When was the White Tower built when it comes to the Third Age? Like, how long after the end of the Second Age did we get the White Tower?
I have a timeline.
Go for it.
They decided to start building it in 47 AB, had a major battle to consolidate power in 77 AB, started actually building it in 98 AB, and finished building it in 202 AB.
Okay, so finished building it, and then 300 years after it was built.
So 500 years after the breaking, give or take the irregularities in the calendar.
500 years they worked to try to figure out how to address the tainted Sidene and male channelers, and still tried to work through that process. That's more dedicated, than I guess when I think about, the introduction to the Red Ajah and to the gentling of channelers is a different one for readers, right? You don't get that scope as much, and you kind of gloss over that quote. Like, you showed me that quote and I was like, wow, that's not something that comes to mind at all. Yeah. As a reader, I'm kind of embedded and like thinking this is terrible and these people are wrong and how dare they do this. So it's interesting to look at it from the other side. Any thoughts here, Shannan?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we not only losing all of the male channelers, or at least losing them as partners and collaborators, but also in recognizing as the breaking happens, now we've got Dragon Mount, and we've got a prophecy that says, we've got to keep an eye on that mountain over there, and hey, we've got this island that we can build on. And so I think that is although it did take them, it sounds like, a couple hundred years to pull themselves together and create this more centralized, system and centralized group, they were able to build Tar Valon and build the White Tower in the shadow of Dragon Mount, so that they recognized that this is where they needed to be. They needed to protect civilization from the next, coming of the dragon. And I think, actually, if you want to pull up even that third
quote. Hey, Taylor.
It's not even a quote. It's just a list of the sizes of the Ajahs, right? Just
Shannan 3 on that one.
Yeah. Just recognizing that the Red Ajah has been the largest Ajah. And and it, based on the information that we have in the Big White Book and other books, the sizes of those Ajahs may be fluctuated over time, but the relative sizes really didn't that much. And the Red Ajah was always the largest. And there was this recognition that maybe one of the primary jobs of the Aes Sedai was to protect civilization, of course, from that next coming. And part of that was staying in Tar Valon, being next to Dragon Mountain, being there to watch for the next potential breaking. And so,
yeah, that's interesting for those that are like I said, are just listening. This from the Wheel of Time Companion. It says approximate Ajah sizes at the last battle: red, approximately 200 sisters; green, approximately 180 sisters; gray, approximately 140 sisters; brown, approximately 130 sisters; yellow, approximately 120 sisters; blue, approximately 100 sisters; and white, approximately 80 sisters. Yeah, it's when you start looking at it that way, and not kind of a more of an emotional reaction to maybe what Rand is going through, which I think is easy to kind of get into. It is really, I'm less judgmental as I've grown, as I've aged, about the Aes Sedai. And do we know exactly when the Ajahs formed, capital A, when it comes to after the breaking? Do we have a concept of when that moment happens where they're formally these 7 Ajahs?
I think it's after the tower is completed.
Well, the tower itself has the 7 pie-shaped sections, right? and we can talk about that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Built into the tower. So if the tower's completed in 200, I think it's fairly early after the breaking.
Okay, so very early after the breaking. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, that's both of those points are right. So if you look in the Big White Book, this is page 91, and it's talking about that period, that 98 years after the breaking. And by that time it says, let me just read this. By 98 AB, the name the White Tower had been in use for some time for the planned central structure, perhaps as long as 30 years. So the tower itself would not be finished for another 100 years. And then it says that they had an Amyrlin seat and they had a hall of the tower, but there is a council of 7 that is recorded as closely advising the Amyrlin seat. And earlier in that chapter, it mentions that when the Aes Sedai were first forming, there was this group of women representing independent groups. And it refers to them as Ajahs small a. That's something like they represented different Ajahs if they can still be called that. And there are about a dozen women that are named, but 6 of those women are also part of this Council of 7 that are advising the Amyrlin years later. And so what we get is this picture that the White Tower is really formed by the fusion of these independent groups that had kind of clumped together during the breaking. And each of those groups clearly had different ideas about what was the priority. So one group had the idea that the priority was getting this male channeler problem under control, stopping the breaking, preventing any more breaking. Another group is saying, the shadow is still there. There's still Trollocs, there's still Murdral. The Dark One's not going to be bound forever. We have to be ready for that. Another group is saying, the world's been broken. We need to heal everything. And so really what we get with the Aes Sedai is the appearance of a united front, but they start off as these independent groups that all have a different sense of what their priority should be, and that never really goes away.
Yeah, it's so interesting because there certainly is ends up being the causes that get the most support, and there's probably some political, posturing there. And do we know though when the first instance of the Black Ajah is made clear in that history? Do we have that, or do we have a notion of it?
I've always heard that it was Ishamael founded it on his first jailbreak, his first furlough from the Boer. Was when he founded it. That's what I was aware of.
Which I think that's right, and I think they'll tell me if this is wrong, because I'm feeling like that in the lead up to the Trolloc Wars.
I believe so. Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
he's doing both of those things. So basically, 1,000 years after the breaking.
Okay, interesting. Let's bring our next caller in. I know we might not get to all. There's 5 callers waiting. We might not get to all of them, but let's bring our next one in. Welcome to the Dusty Wheel, Norm. How you doing tonight?
Great innkeeper, as always. Like I raise my glass to you, sir.
Cheers,
yes,
man.
I'm here. Great innkeeper. And I raise my glass to you, loyal patrons and shopkeeps, and of course, all to everyone in the chat. What's up?
So what's going on, Norm?
I hate to be the realist here, but this whole thing reminds me of a conversation I had with a student that was telling me that hey, if the Force was real and Jedi were running around, that would be really cool. And I told him, no, it wouldn't. And I think the same thing would be in account with Aes Sedai and the One Power, because there would be a lot of shady people in the world. And I'm not just talking about dark friends. I'm just talking about some shady things going on with the One Power. And I think instead of a utopia, it would have to take a Yoda-like figure in order to raise it to this high and mighty utopia that you guys were talking about, because quite honestly, you're going to have a lot of people using compulsion as soon as they figure out how to use it. You're going to have a lot of people using traveling to nefarious ways instead of this, I'm just going to go from one place to another. No, it's, look, there's this beautiful diamond that's halfway across the world. I'm just going to go teleport and grab my hand and take said diamond and teleport out. So just don't just see it as, for a good minute, it's going to be all wine and roses. It's going to be more of, snap, what are we going to do with all of these powerful people? And due respect, yes, you are going to have some superheroes. Yes, there are going to be some goodies out there in the world, but you're going to have more shady, people out there who will hide their powers and will try to be a Palpatine more than they're going to be an Obi-Wan or an Anakin. So, yeah.
That's a good take for it. I think Art had kind of talked about this, which was, the fact that Jordan kind of does paint it like they do achieve somehow. They're able to overcome some of that, right? No, we have the use of binders, and there's not like there weren't criminals, and there wasn't like people weren't using their powers like the Forsaken to do bad things. But he was saying that they figured it out somehow, but it didn't last as long as maybe they had hoped, right? It did come crashing down on them, and it certainly did affect everyone, because when you lost whatever that was, that Utopia was, it almost destroyed everything. Like everyone was almost destroyed. So, and then the new structure that came up after that, that's what we're really tackling now, which is how did they address that? All of a sudden people didn't want a bunch of superheroes running around, but they did, because they wanted to be saved, because the breaking is scary. And so it's this mix moment. Lancer, great take. Before I let you go, remind me, who's your Forsaken of choice? If you could be a Forsaken, which one would you be?
Well, she's gonna love me when I say this, but it's Grendel. I mean, she had it going on. She was probably the most real of all of the Forsaken, and how she looked at life and how she handled things. I think she was the most human of all the Forsaken.
Grendel's your jam. Okay. Hey,
yeah, Grendel, for sure.
Thank you so much. As always, it's fun to hear your voice, man, and great take on Aes Sedai, and we'll talk to you soon. Appreciate you waiting around.
Take care, buddy.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye. Yeah, this is what they're kind of struggling with a bit in the Third Age when they're creating the White Tower, which is, what do you do at this point? How do we survive? Because they were looked at differently after the breaking, and are still 3,000 years after the breaking looked at differently, right? We first interact with them in Edmund's Field, and people think they kind of have that like cliche witch, it's like there's witches, and we can't trust the witches, if you will. There's that idea about the Aes Sedai. Do you think the Aes Sedai succeeded in that mission of being able to still serve, the world in the Third Age, just differently? Or by the time we meet them, have they kind of failed in that? How would you answer that question? Yeah, go ahead.
So this is one of my favorite things to talk about, because as fans, we of course see and love to point out and talk about all the flaws with Aes Sedai and all the ways in which they mess up or are ineffective or are counterproductive, et cetera, et cetera. But Norm brings up some good points. Like, it is, if you think about it, it is kind of breathtaking that the Aes Sedai and the White Tower never try to take over Randland. They never use their power to take over, and presumably they could. There's no force that would counter them. They do, in fact, outlaw compulsion. There's no outside group that could force them to forego the use of compulsion. That's a rule they decide on for themselves and that they enforce upon themselves. Although you might argue that they don't actually know how to do it anymore. So, but at least in theory, they're outlawing compulsion, and they're voluntarily saying, we won't use our powers to kill. And fans also love to talk about the Three Oaks and the ways that handicaps Aes Sedai. But it does, when you have these seven disparate groups with their own interpretations of what the priority is, it does give them something to have a group identity and a group commitment to some certain principles. The last thing, and I'll be quiet. The last thing that I think it's important to say is they do manage for 3,000 years to keep the world informed, or at least the area in Randland informed, that there is a shadow, there is a dragon who is going to be reborn, there's going to be this last battle, and they manage to keep that knowledge alive despite everything else that happens and everything that fades to myth. The world knows that, and that's pretty important knowledge for them not to lose.
Do they spend enough time trying to? It's a tough it's tough to get to where they're at, and then to have them decide like, oh yeah, we're going to try to recreate the previous society we came from, even we don't have all the equipment, we don't have the capability, but yes, let's try to integrate people into a one power world when the world doesn't run off the one power anymore, right? Like they've lost that, and is that something that the world should get back to, and is that part of their goal, or is it, to your point, Shannan, like the real goal here was like, here's Dragonmount, we're gonna just try to make sure the world survives until the prophesied moment, and we'll hope to be there, and is that basically 3,000 years of their goals are pretty much to get there, or do they have other goals that they've succeeded, and have they made the world a better place at this point?
Yeah, I think that that was at least the primary goal. I think that most of them would have agreed that, that that protecting civilization really from the next breaking was the overall goal, but they certainly had additional aims along the way. And I would almost even maybe slightly disagree with Chris in that they didn't take over the world, right? They might not have put their name and their flag in all of the countries and capitals, but I think that they had as much control as they wanted. I think that if there was something that they wanted to change, then they would have found a way. And even with Amadisia and Children of the Light, okay, well let's pen those people together. Let's keep them in one little capital, but I believe that a lot of specifically Randland, the structure, and the different communities, whether or not they were familiar with the White Tower and Aes Sedai and channeling and the rest, that for the most part, the White Tower, kind of had knowledge and intent to support all of those groups around the world. As far as going into the next stage, I think that's your question. Now that the power is changing and we're going into the next stage, and what does that look like, and does it make sense to base it off of what we've seen in the past? I think that there are definitely going to be some traditionalists that bring these ideas and say, this is the strengths that we saw from having the Ajahs, from having a centralized location, from whatever those elements were. And then there are going to be other people that recognize, this is why those need to be updated. And I think, honestly, Cadsuane is a perfect person to see both of those sides, right? She's been there forever, but she doesn't hold herself to, to those limitations, and she doesn't feel bound by anything. So I think that that's setting up the next story. Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious then, as far as what they hope to accomplish in the Fourth Age, but stepping quickly back, Aradiapedia, for the Third Age, is there a creed? Do the Aes Sedai have a mission statement in the Third Age, other than just be there, to help it end? Is there something overarching goal that they are trying to accomplish other than that?
I hadn't really thought about that before, but Shannan's point earlier made me realize that, like in the Age of Legends, they got to do whatever they wanted. And then the breaking happened, and suddenly it doesn't matter what you want to do. You have to be part of surviving until the apocalypse comes back around. And it's like, how are they going to approach the Fourth Age? Like, that's a huge open-ended question, because they don't have the technology and the weaves and the knowledge to snap into a utopia. They don't have the culture to snap into a utopia, but they no longer have an overarching goal to force them towards. I think they did. Yeah. And now they don't. And that's, plus men are back in the picture. So
it's all new and old all together. So I think this is a good time to bring in our next caller here has been waiting a while. Let's see if he has an answer for us in this regard. I think some of you know him. Welcome to the Dusty Wheel, Tom DeSimone. How you doing, man? Are you there?
I'm doing good, man. How's it going?
Nice. Thanks for staying on with us and waiting for us. Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Tom. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm good. How's it going?
Fantastic. So if you had to give the Aes Sedai a mission statement in the Third Age, and they came recruiting, for Aes Sedai, what would be the mission statement that would sell you on what the Aes Sedai were about in the Third Age?
So this is after last battle.
No, this is before. So Third Age, what was the purpose of the Aes Sedai? Is it just survive the apocalypse 3,000 years from now, or did they have some other purpose in your mind?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, to get back to what you said before, where it's did they fail? In a sense, yes, but that's only because the game was rigged against them. The breaking was going to happen no matter how good they did or whatever they did. The breaking is going, not the breaking, but the last battle is going to happen no matter what they do, no matter what they did. No, it's happening. The dragon's coming back. The Dark One's going to weaken the seals and break free. It doesn't matter. I think their mission statement was kind of very much just making sure that everyone's ready for that, and themselves as well. And I think they did kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit, where they fell into the issue of only kind of paying attention to the people that are in power and to the areas that have the most interest, where you notice that soon as they start exploring other villages and accepting other small villages and accepting older people into the tower, their numbers immediately started swelling. When they started paying attention to other places, they started finding women that can channel. The Two Rivers is a bad example because there were 3 tel'aran'rhiod there, and they could have influenced how many channelers were born there.
That's true. But would you blame some of the failures? Not blame. Would you give credit to Ishamael then for foiling the readiness and foiling the plans? Because it seems like they had a long time, and they're doing some basic stuff at the end of the Third Age that makes me as a reader kind of cringe every time. I'm like, oh yeah, if your mission is to get ready for this, maybe you should have been in these villages more often. I don't understand why this is remarkable and maybe you should have tested out that theory that they had about
absolutely.
Maybe we're not having enough children that can, it feels like, and I want to say
that's exactly what I was going to say. That's exactly what I'm pretty sure that Ishamael had a hand in we have to gentle all the men who can channel and then just put them out to pasture and let them die. Because we know that channeling is tied to genetics. Robert Jordan has said that.
Yep.
If it's like a recessive gene that you can have it to tap into Sidar and Sidine. Doesn't matter. It's not tied to your gender. It's tied to a gene, which we see when the Dark One brings back people in other bodies. They don't, for lack of a better terminology, they don't have sex with men who can channel anymore, and they're breeding. And they actually talk about that in the book, where I think we're breeding channeling out of us. And they even mention how there's fewer and fewer people that are born with the spark. They find women who can learn, but there's fewer and fewer people born with the spark of channeling, the people that are innately born and are going to channel anyway. And one of the theories that I can't remember who brought it up at JordanCon a number of years ago was that we're on our way to the how Robert Jordan talked about our age where we live now was once a time in the
sure
whatever in the calendar and the wheel, and we didn't have any channeling. We're on our way back there again, where we don't have channeling anymore. Because they bred it out of themselves accidentally.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And that's the 3,000 years piece of this that always blows my mind until you add that Forsaken component in there and someone that understood how channeling was passed genetically.
I think Ishamael knew it was coming and didn't really care. My bad.
Yeah, when I was
my phone is cutting out, so I don't know when you're talking and not talking.
That's okay. It was all good up to that moment. You're good. I was just saying, Ishamael knows the genetic side of this. Ishamael knows what to tweak in their formation as the White Tower to to stop them in their goals and to make it harder on them. And so we have to give him a lot of credit, because this is 3,000 years and it feels like they barely
100%.
made it, like they barely arrived there.
He's he's also the most Forsaken that's in touch with like what's really going to happen if the Dark One wins. Like he doesn't care about establishing footholds of power over people or accumulating wealth or any of that stuff. He just wants to hasten the end. He knows that if the Dark One breaks the wheel, that's it. Like he's not going to rule over anything. There's going to be nothing left.
Yeah, this goes back to the point that Chris made.
I think he's just enjoying himself over those 3,000 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Chris made this point that he likes Ashamael because he was the most consequential. And I guess I can give Ashamael credit then when I think about the Aes Sedai in the last 3,000 years, that for them to kind of show up with those numbers that Shannan, you posted to the last battle, like those are not big numbers. Yeah. Those are very small numbers. So,
and I think to Tom's point, part of it is, that the male channelers aren't part of the gene pool anymore. But when you think of it, two other parts are, honestly, the women channelers aren't part of the gene pool anymore. They're not having a ton of kids in the White Tower, right?
Nope.
The women channelers aren't mothers usually, and also there is some history understanding how recruiting potential channelers was a big part in previous ages, and kind of how that testing was done for men, how the testing was done for women, how it differed, and that was a main, that was a responsibility. And now, or in this age, that is not the responsibility of any of these Ajahs. How is it we've got 7 Ajahs and not one of them is we should find more of us? That's not my job. And it's a big gap.
No, that's a huge Aradiapedia, what were you gonna say?
I'm just nodding. That's just like
yes.
This is Ashamael's fault. This is a lack of basic knowledge about genetics. Like, come on, yellows, come on, blues. Like, how are you not figuring this out?
Yeah.
I think it's because Ashamael was making sure they wouldn't. That's what makes sense.
It occurs to me that
probably.
sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No. You go, Chris. I talked enough.
It just occurs to me that we often think about how the Reds' purpose is going to have to change now, but the Green Ajah, they really have no purpose now. The last battle has been fought, and that's what they were standing ready for. And of course, the Greens' kind of secondary characteristic that they are known for is that they are interested in men. So maybe that can be something that they pursue. But it seems to me, more seriously, it seems to me like in a lot of ways we're keyed for a possible resurgence, that men and women are working together again now, and we've got lots of channelers from the Aiel and from the Windfinders, and there's the possibility of between Kavara and Androl, you have Ashaman and Aes Sedai beginning to form romances, and so there's the possibility for a resurgence. And it feels to me like the big X factor is the Shan, and if the Shan end up becoming the dominant force, because they do remove women from the gene pool, and they absolutely will push society further and further to that point where channelers eventually are gone.
Sure. That's a interesting twist to the conversation.
That's a great point, actually, and I wanted to just tap on what Chris said, because it's so. I think obviously, honestly, after the last battle is over, that the Red Ajah and the Ashaman will be the ones that work together the closest to make that kind of perfect channeling that was done in the Age of Legends, because they always talk about how channeling is imperfect now because they don't have Saidin and Saidar working together anymore to produce things, and like it doesn't matter how strong you are, if you're always made better if you work together.
Yeah,
I think that the purpose of the oh, my bad, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you would think that they would have caught that lesson from the Age of Legends, but go ahead. Yeah. You think that their books would have said, like, yeah, we need to figure this out, even though it's tough. But
yeah,
sorry,
I could see the Green Ajah and the Ashaman being like the U.S. Marshals type things, where like they have to go. Oh, there's a problem with a channeler, so an evil channeler somewhere. Go and handle him. The local constabulary can't handle him.
Yep.
Right. Hey, Tom, thank you so much for your comments and for waiting online as long as you did. Really appreciate it. It's awesome to hear your voice. We got to have you back here at the Dusty Wheel.
I love supporting the show. I love you guys. You do. Yeah, of course. Anytime. I love supporting the show. You do a great job. I had a lot of fun tonight watching. I mean, not to mention that Shannan's there and Chris is there, and I'm meeting your other guest there for the first time tonight. But I do love everything you do. It's fantastic.
Yeah, love it, Tom. We'll have you back soon, I'm sure. So hey, man, have a good night. Okay. Bye.
Okay.
You too. See ya.
So we have two more callers here. I want to get some thoughts from the panel on, what do and keep this in mind here as we have these last two callers in, and then kind of want to cover, what are people getting wrong about Aes Sedai in the Third Age? We just kind of critiqued them pretty hard. Whether or not it was from failure caused by a Shamael, but I want to take the other view of that. Like, what are we missing about the Aes Sedai and their successes? But let me bring Seth into the call. Hey, Seth, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. So thank you for holding there for so long. So what was your comment that made you want to call us?
Oh gosh, there is so much shenanigans here. Let me just start at the end. I guess I'll work my way backwards rather. So I was thinking that basically the Ajahs really were, or rather the Tower's mission statement, I guess, in the Third Age was basically just be ready for the apocalypse. So that was it, right? And each Ajah had their own sort of like personal interest or whatnot, right? So it was really just might is right, and they have the one power, so they can do whatever they want, or at least I think that's the perspective everyone else who can't channel has of the White Tower and the Ajahs. Jumping into some random shenanigans here. I don't know if it should be the first thing they show in the Second Age, but the raid on Child Ghoul. I think whenever they do that, and I think they should do that in the first season. I don't know when, but I do think there's just there's a lot of background you got to do. So I think you take 15, 20 minutes out and you deliver some background. And I think the best way to do that is just the raid itself. So I don't know what that looks like, but I figure if you're going to go to the Second Age, make it worth it. You know what I mean? $1 million.
Go big.
I'm just saying. But that being said, I do think the best flashbacks will probably be way later down on the line, and it'll be anything with like Arthur Hawkwing and stuff like that. Those will probably be the coolest flashbacks, I'd imagine. But the only other thing I was thinking of here was that, I think in the Second Age, being an Aes Sedai, or rather being able to channel, is just more like being, like an outstanding athlete, really. Just like it was amazing, and you could use that skill for research or for whatever it is. Whereas in the Third Age, it was like, oh snap, this is this life or death now, and we just need to be ready for the end of the game. I don't know what they do in the Fourth Age. I don't know how you reconcile things. You believe you've taken care of the Dark One and whatnot, so I don't know what the tower does after that, but.
Yeah. No, it's all great thoughts. I'm glad you noted all of them while you're waiting for us. Before we let you go, what was your Forsaken of choice if you had to pick one? If you were going to be a Forsaken, who would you be?
Nakomi.
that's a whole nother show. I love that comment, and we'll have to on the Looney Theory show that we'll do eventually here for hopefully JordanCon at some point. We'll have to cover Nakomi as Forsaken. I love it. Hey Seth, thank you so much for calling in, man. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Cheers. Yeah.
Have a good one. Bye bye. Yeah, great comments. Mash of the Deck is online for our last caller. I'm going to leave Mash of the Deck's call to the very, very, very end of our conversation here. So, Aradiapedia, when it comes to some comments that Seth made as he kind of backed through and talking about where do they go from here from the Fourth Age perspective, and how the Third Age instructs that. What do you say to people that are like, yeah, the Aes Sedai kind of almost failed or basically failed? Is there something we don't know about Aes Sedai in the Third Age we should know as readers?
I think the ivory tower factor, right? I graduated with just an undergraduate 2 years ago, and reintegrating into a world where everyone is not held to the class schedule and we're all doing midterms in the same week, and talking with people who are all, oh, what class are you in? Because we're all in a class. Reintegrating with what life is like outside of that is a challenge. And I only went through an undergrad. Like the Aes Sedai, they literally have, I saw a comment in chat, they have an ivory tower on an island. Like, so their isolation and their lack of empathy and ability to deal with the real world is like, it's centuries old compared to just a regular grad student, right? So I think that we underestimate the amount of cross-cultural communication that has to happen. The Aes Sedai very much separate themselves from who they were, from their culture, from their families. And then they go out and they try to interact with the world. The fact that they do as well as they do is honestly probably more impressive. The fact that they survived at all, the fact that they made it to the last battle at all, given that they very much isolate themselves, I think is actually really quite impressive for all that we rip them up one side and down the other for it.
Oh my gosh, an ivory tower on an island will stick with me. I think that whole concept of like, Jordan's just throwing that in our face. Like, yeah, exactly. That is such a great way to think about this. I want to point this out. Again, this thought just came to me as you were talking about this, which is look at the way they test each other. And you have to make your way up to become Aes Sedai. If you look at the testing, I'm going to guarantee you that is not the process that happened in the Second Age. The way that they refine you and make sure you're one of them, right? It almost becomes an us or them, because in many ways they were worried about the Black Ajah, right? Or this concept of dreadlords and people that didn't have the right. They wouldn't have the right fit. They weren't going to understand the necessity of this. They weren't going to help build this group. And so, yeah, you think about how they, think about the ivory tower on an island, and then just think of what they did from a purification standpoint before you could be called Aes Sedai. Really differentiated themselves so much from the world that, yeah, I guess when you look at it that way, I'm more impressed what they came out with, what we get here in the Third Age when we meet them. Chris, anything from you? Something readers don't recognize about Aes Sedai in the Third Age that they should?
So I'm going to disagree with a little bit with the point that's been made a couple of times, that the purpose of the Third Age Aes Sedai was to prepare for the apocalypse, to prepare for the last battle, because I don't think that's how they saw themselves. They saw themselves as existing to defend against the shadow. And functionally, it's the same thing, but it's the phrasing that is a little different, because they do see themselves as the counterpart to the shadow. And that's a lot of their symbolism. That's the whole White Tower thing. We are the pure light to stand against the darkness of the shadow. There is often this imagery that almost equates the light with the one power, and as if the one power is antithetical to the shadow and to the darkness. So despite many failures from Aes Sedai, the overall goal of helping humankind stand against the shadow, I think you do have to say they succeeded, because humankind did stand against the shadow. And then there's just some specific small things, like I've mentioned. We talked about windfinders and sea folk and the Aiel, some the wise ones, and the different ways, and in some ways the better ways they handle channeling. But there are some things that the Aes Sedai preserved, and some knowledge that the Aes Sedai preserved that nobody else succeeded in, and that the overall goal of standing against the shadow is one thing, and the other channeling societies didn't have that as their primary goal. But it's also small things like the knowledge of linking. The Windfinders didn't have that. The Wise Ones didn't have that. Without linking, you don't get Nynaeve and Rand being able to cleanse sighting, which is absolutely essential to standing against the shadow at the last battle. So without that one piece of knowledge that Aes Sedai were able to keep alive when no one else that we know of did, without that one piece of knowledge, you're not able to stand against the shadow. You're not able to cleanse the taint. And there are a lot of little things like that you could go through.
So I like what you're saying here, which is, like, in the end, someone had to stand against the shadow. And who was that person going to be? Who was that group going to be? And no one else was that cause, right? All of the Ajahs together are a single Ajah, which is stand against the shadow. It's the stand against the shadow Ajah that came out of the Second Age, and no one else was making that choice. And clearly they recognized that no one else would actually make, like, somebody had to hold that line. And so I'm with you there. It's such an interesting conversation. I always go back and forth between just how incompetent I think that they are at the same time. Like, but you know what? Other people just went on and did other things, but they did hold the line against the shadow. And if they hadn't, then Ishamael probably would have won out at some point in the Third Age. I think it's fair to make that a case. To your point here, Shannan, anything come to mind that hasn't been covered as far as just things readers or perspectives readers should have maybe when looking at, or could have when looking at the Aes Sedai in the Third Age?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. The ivory tower on an island is a great thing, and it's just kind of right in your face. Same with having a sword in the stone, and all of these great illusions that are built in so subtly and yet not, right. I love those. I think that they're great. They're all great points. I think that they are definitely isolated, and more than just separating themselves and going through these different experiences. The Aes Sedai, the women that channel the wind power, are different than the rest of society. Their life is different. The length of their life is different. Their perspective is different. And so, they really don't have much of a chance of understanding, or at least of sympathizing, maybe of empathizing, but not sympathizing with the communities that they serve. And that's a gap that is going to breed distrust in some or awe in some, but definitely a gap, right? Definitely, a chasm that isn't going to allow them to necessarily work collaboratively with the communities they serve versus the communities that Chris is talking about with the Windfinders and the different wise women or red belts or whoever is more infused within the community. And so I think when we talk about Aes Sedai, when we talk about the White Tower, it's easy for us to think of them as a collective. But what Jordan tells us, and what I think the reason that we love these books is we have thousands and thousands of pages of, it's not about the organization, it's about the individuals, it's about the choices that they make, and it's about understanding their history and what has developed them, and and how they see their heroism in their story and how that manifests. And that's why we love all the entire tale.
Yeah, oh man, you guys are awesome. That's a great way to encapsulate everything here, which is, in the end, Jordan isn't trying to have a story about a bureaucracy. It's there, it's a reality, it's part of everything there. But the point he's making is that individuals do make differences here, and that's why we get a Nynaeve and a Moiraine, and an Egwene, showing us that they can still, and that that even with having that power that you can make a difference, and the opposite of that, right? Having that power, you can destroy things. And I think you get that. That's the balance I think is happening with the White Tower and the story of it, which is you don't get this just kind of like everyone buys into this mission and they're great and they're perfect, but you also don't get everyone sucks at this, right? So you're getting some kind of middle ground that goes back and forth as they kind of pull and tug at this idea of like, what should the White Tower actually become in the end? So yeah, thanks for throwing that in there, which is something I often forget in these kind of conversations, because I'm just talking about this entity, if you will. So yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, really, I think that without putting in too much of a plug, at the end of the day, most people walk away from the Wheel of Time wanting to be an Aes Sedai or wanting to have that experience of going to Tarvalon. And honestly, that's why Tarvalon.net exists. Is our founder said one day, how do you do this in the real world, and create our community so that you could follow that path and serve all and create a scholarship and, and do all these great things. Sure. And, at the end of the day, really, I think most of the readers come away from the experience wanting to experience, to grow that experience, whether it's in the TV show or an online community or watching the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, this conversation could go on. What I've realized is we could talk about Aes Sedai forever. I put Aes Sedai, Ages, Ajahs, and Ruling the World, and it probably is 5 shows. So I appreciate all of your other comments so far. We haven't probably scratched too much of the surface of Aes Sedai here, but hopefully those of you who are watching have enjoyed this, and we'll have to come back and have this kind of conversation again. I want to bring in Master of the Deck. I think Master of the Deck has a question here that I see, and let's let that question, the answer to that question, kind of be the end of this show. So welcome to the Dusty Wheel, Master of the Deck. How you doing tonight?
I am doing great, because it's been a great couple of hours watching all y'all.
It's fun, right? So what is your question for the panel that is going to end off the show here at the Dusty Wheel?
Well, given all of the discussion that's been had and all aspects of it, either at the beginning of the events of canon, which is the end of the Third Age, or at the beginning of the Fourth Age, do you believe that the White Tower is a failed institution?
Who wants to try to tackle that answer first here?
We literally just talked about how, individualism matters, and I'm bringing it right back into the generalization.
Yeah.
It's
so
a hard
Shannan,
question to force into a yes or a no, but...
Yeah. Is the White Tower a failed institution, basically? Yeah, go ahead, Shannan. Oh.
They are not. It is not a failed entity. Whether or not it was out of luck, they found Egwene. Egwene got there. I think that she is building for the future, and she helped get the community healed and get them to a place that they needed to be for that last battle. So yeah, part of it was luck, but I might be biased.
You're maybe a little bit. No.
I think the White Tower is anything but a failed entity.
Okay. Chris, you were speaking up there. Do you have what's your thoughts on this? What would be your answer?
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. Are we saying they failed in the Third Age, or at the end of the last battle, they're a failed institution that is doomed to go under at some point?
So I think the point that was made by Shannan is important here in considering the journey that the White Tower undergoes, which is a remarkable one, from the beginning of the events of canon, right, in 998, until after the last battle with, the death of Egwene Alvear. Was it a failed institution? Do you believe it at the beginning of where canon starts? And then by the end, it had been reformed to the point where it was not failed anymore? Or was it failed, period? Or had it failed by the end of canon? I suppose there are a couple ways you could go with that.
So, I would say that the way that it is structured and how it definitely has failures, but the institution itself, the laws, the setup, the organization, and most importantly, the individuals, the fictional individuals, come together to make it a success. But
okay, Chris, what were you gonna say?
So I don't think we need to pull up the quote, but this relates to that quote number 6 that I sent in. Because one of the things to consider thinking about the state of Aes Sedai as the story starts is the vileness after the Aiel War. And if you read that entry in the Wheel of Time Companion, it makes the point that the Black Ajah, under the direction of Ishamael, had really decimated kind of the front ranks of Aes Sedai. That there were 30 to 50 sisters that died during that period, and that many of them were among the oldest, the strongest, and the most experienced, which means that the Aes Sedai lost a huge chunk of their leadership then. And you can see that with the searchers that Tamra picked to go out and try to find the Dragon Reborn. There was one from each Ajah, other than the Reds, obviously, but they were, if you look up their entries, if you look at their strength levels, they were at the top rank of Aes Sedai, and they were all known for being smart and experienced and leaders, and they're all murdered. And so a big part of the political infighting that we see, I think you have to attribute to the fact that in the last 20 years, the front ranks of Aes Sedai have been decimated. And I think that's probably why young Aes Sedai like Swan and Lyanna and Shiriam and Elida and Alviarin are all as prominent as they are, because a lot of those who had been around longer were wiped out.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
There are probably good and bad aspects to that, because the Aes Sedai did have lots of ways that they were set in that needed to be shaken up. So, there's some positive to that too, possibly.
I think my answer to that is that it looks failed, and it could have done a lot better. But as somebody who empathizes and admires Masana, I have to say that the fact that Egwene Alvear was able to draw on 3,000 years of institutional badassery to break her mind says that it was not a failed institution. Like, whatever else, it gave Egwene the strength after 2 years of story, 6 months of training under Swan, who was herself a very young Amyrlin, to just crush Masana's mind. That was the institution. That was, I am Egwene Alvear, you can kill me, but I am also the Amyrlin seat. And
yeah,
love that answer.
Yeah, that's a good. I feel like I'm gonna push against. It's not against. It's just, I guess the way I view this is that it fundamentally has structural issues that maybe just will always lead to specific failures that will prevent it from becoming anything other than what it is, which is it's an institution there to defend against the shadow. And I think it does that decently well, considering just how capable the shadow is, and I just don't think it has the capability to become much more than that. And so I don't think it's a failed institution for that purpose. But if the purpose is to evolve and become something more for humanity than just, a defender of the shadow or against the shadow, then I think that it structurally has failure. It structurally has doesn't have the right structure in order to become anything beyond it. So yeah, that's kind of where I lean in that answer. Sorry, go ahead, Aradia.
Just to follow up on that, I have had some very good conversations with people about how Egwene would have been a terrible peacetime Amyrlin. And I think that the White Tower as an institution that survived the last 3,000 years may become intrinsically flawed and failed and incapable of surviving into the Fourth Age, because it was focused on that survival. It was focused on surviving the last battle, and it gave Egwene that gritty strength. I don't think that that's going to translate well. I think that those flaws are going to become much more apparent and break everything in the Fourth Age if they don't get some serious Andral and Pavara taking over.
They would have to have some serious renovation. So, Master of the Deck, you know how I do this all the time. It goes back to you. End us off here. What is your thought to your own question?
My answer it's always easy to play both sides of this. My answer is an unequivocal yes. I think the White Tower is a failed institution, and that it has no place in the Fourth Age. There was a question earlier in the show about what you believe the mission statement was of the White Tower. And the mission of the White Tower at the end of the Third Age was the preservation of the White Tower. Because they were no longer an institution of service, but they were an institution of power and politics. Because Tar-Valon was not just the White Tower, it was also a nation. And the leader of Tar-Valon was the Amyrlin seat. And the political body of Tar-Valon was the council in the White Tower. So the Aes Sedai were no longer just trying to save the world from the shadow, but they were also trying to, be a nation, or lead a nation, you might say, from their, ivory tower on an island. So, we look at this, we see this in the various flaws in the process that, that Nynaeve is all pissed off about when she's doing her Aes Sedai test. That everything that they do to become an Aes Sedai, as part of the White Tower at the end of the Third Age, is an effort at self-preservation, maintaining political ground, and essentially cultivating social elitism. So that by the time someone becomes an Aes Sedai, any grand ideas of nobility or world saving become secondary to towing the company line for the most part. So that even when their own members act egregiously, like we see with Alana when she force bonds Rand, or with the events of the Vileness, or when Tom's nephew Owen was gentled without a trial, a monkey trial, you might say, that there's an institutional reluctance to hold those people accountable, or to at least show outsiders that they're being held accountable for their wrongs. Because if your job is to preserve yourself as an institution, as a political entity, and that is hemorrhaging power, we see that with, the general sentiment towards the Aes Sedai by the time the Third Age has come to its end, that, they can't afford to lose it, which is ultimately, why there was a coup. It's why the tower broke. And so some of the comments that were made that, in the Fourth Age, the White Tower couldn't possibly exist the way that it had been. Absolutely. I think it should fade into obscurity of, academia. It should be a university, and that's that.
Yeah. This is and by the way, man, we could do another hour just on this question alone.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is fantastic about this. Yeah, I absolutely can see all of these points of view, and that's the fun part about this, right? Like that's the whole point that Jordan often made, and he loved hearing all of these views. He loved this part of it, right? Like analyzing what he wrote and how we all kind of view this a bit differently. Mash of the Deck, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It was a blast. Thank you for sticking around there and holding online there and ending the show off like that. I really appreciate that. And we'll hopefully see you here in the after show.
Thank you for.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What did you say?
It's been a great show. Thank you for people, for the show. It's been a great time listening. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, as you can tell.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. I can't wait to continue that in Discord after this. So, hey, talk to you soon. Okay, Master Deck.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, hopefully, I'm kind of curious to those that end up watching this after the live show. I'd love to see your comments. What do you think about that final question? What would your answer be as compared to the 5 answers you just heard us give, which all kind of had shades of differences and took really interesting stands on different parts of, the institution of the White Tower. I'd love to see what those comments are. If you're in live chat and afterwards you want to leave us a comment, I'd love to see what your thoughts were about that. And I just wanted to thank everyone for actually throwing some, I appreciate that, donations there from Delusions, and I think I saw some Miss Sarah James. I think Chris threw us something out there too. I really appreciate that. That's really kind of you guys. Of course, you never have to do that. So yeah, thank you. Any just final thoughts from me? If you're here still, please like the video just so fans can find this later on. And make sure you go check out tarvalon.net. It's a fantastic place. I think if their leader here, Shannan, is any example, that is definitely a place you will find a home as a fan. If the way that you view the White Tower is that, you see kind of some inherent values in what they were attempting to do, and in our real life, you want to kind of take part in that. So, and Aradiapedia, thank you so much. WoTSpoilers, guys. what else can you say? It's a fantastic podcast. They have their own Discord. It's really active. You guys do live recordings, right?
Yes, we do.
On Discord. You can go check those out. It's really fun to be part of live recordings of any podcast, and especially one as well. Oh, I want to say, how far are you guys at now in the books?
We are doing Dumais Wells on Friday.
Oh, wow. Okay, so good timing. This is excellent timing.
If anyone wants to go join our Patreon so that you can come listen to that, we're going to be putting out some social media. We're going to make it an event. We're going to start early. We're going to go late. We have a guest. We are about to wrap up Lord of Chaos. That's where
that is perfect. Dumais Well. What a great moment. Yeah, definitely go look up WoTSpoilers if you haven't already, and check out that Patreon. And if you want to go kind of watch that live discussion. And Chris, as always, thank you for being here. I love our conversations. Jordan Con, I can't wait till we can meet back in person, the two of us and all of you out there someday. It's an amazing experience. And we have conversations like this into the early hours of the morning, and it's a lot of fun. So that being said, you can catch the after show of this on Discord. Come follow us there. And don't forget the watch parties on Twitch. It's exclusively done on Twitch, on our Dusty Wheel Twitch channel. We're going to have a lot of fun with that over the ensuing months here, and we'll release a schedule as soon as we have it, but expect our first watch party to be sometime next week. I think that's everything. Thank you all for showing up, and for those of you that stuck around with us this entire time, what a fun conversation. I know we went a little bit late, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And like I said, be back here next Sunday. We're having a little first reader discussion all about the Dragon Reborn with the Wheel Weaves podcast. So I think that's it. As we say around here, good night from the Dusty Wheel, and smash to black. Hey, welcome back to the Dusty Wheel. You went right to kill it. Look at you, you're all ready. You're just done. I mean, this is like this is
really well. And now I'm like, great, my turn.
And if you don't like that, and you want to say, well, Robert Jordan could have made the two rivers all white. He could have, but he didn't. So
just complimented me on my dress, and as you can clearly see, I'm sad.
I see Luconia as something along the lines of a Shida Haran analog.
It does make sense why it outlasted the breaking.
Yeah.
See, this is why I have Therese in the show, because she's going to correct everything that.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Dusty Wheel Show. What? Meme Off Challenge! Yay!
Terrible, like baby face mounted on like a huge body. So like all of a sudden,
this is not just
like,
a traditional fantasy, right? There are sci-fi
and
elements.
Just a moment ago, Rafe tweeted something. So let me get my guest in here with me, and
probably I would say put in 70-80% of the work. I got to be over the shoulder and be like, no.